Welcome to the Wooper Club League Season 15, Week 7 recap and power rankings. You thought maybe we'd had everything cleared up with only 1 week left, but oh boy, is that just not the case. We'll go over that in just a bit here. I'm your host, IllLogic, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, SteveChuck, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets.
Hey, everybody.
And we have just a few more transactions to go through. Remember, the end of Week 7 was the trade deadline for all those transactions. Some folks exhausting their total use of transactions, getting a little bit of a different look on the teams. Let's take a look at what we see here. It's the Seattle Steamrollers, first off, who were a little bit sick and tired of Weavile missing, despite a couple matches where it hit pretty reliably. There were a couple times they definitely got let down by the triple axle missing, and replacing that with the Ursulina Blood Moon, as well as Grimmsnarl being replaced by Kilowattrel, maybe getting a little more unpredictability there. Only 2 weeks left for the Steamrollers, but a little bit of a different look may suit them well. We'll see here, Steve.
Yeah, getting a different offensive threat, more likely to hit, a little more bulk, which kind of fits the rest of their team, and then switching out, for a support mon, more supportive mon in the Kilowattrel that keeps the same speed and is a little more offensive than Grimmsnarl. So a little bit of a different look. No real notes on how effective it'll be, but we'll see if it works for him.
Yeah, just swapping out an ice type that maybe worked well with the snow, I suppose, but also trading out physical attackers for special. Wonder if we see a similar problem we had to, say, the Agrons early in the season. Next up, Terrifier Heatwave. Well, Weavile's available. I think I'll pick that up, they say, dropping the 105 speed Mienshao and Zarude for that, as well as the Arbalava to get an interesting look there, too. Once again, at the lower speed tiers here, Steve. I think the first thing that jumped out to us is the different speed gaps that the Terrifier Heatwave have, and they are now plugging that in a very different way. As soon as Zarude was going off, too. What do you make of this?
Yeah, you really had brought this to my attention, but previously they had the Deoxys speed 180 to 105 speed gap in Zarude and later Mienshao, and now that Weavile is available and they took that up, they plugged that gap right up, dropping down to 125. That's great. However, they lost all of their 105 speed, so now it's 125 all the way down to, I believe, Yanma's 95. So still a little bit of speed gap and probably a little bit more promising, a little bit bigger now. The gap between 180 to 125, well, pretty big difference in terms of numbers. In terms of mons that are actually in those speed tiers, it's quite limited. It was a lot better when, you were jumping over that 100 speed tier from 95 to 105, because there's just a whole lot more mons at that tier. So I think the speed is overall worse, but Weavile is a mon that the trade for this came immediately after the Steamrolls did it, so they saw it was available and wanted to pick it up immediately. Did whatever they needed to get the points, which happened to be dropping their 105s. And, if they like them on, hopefully it works out for them.
Yeah, we're hoping to see Mienshao go off a little bit, but just really was not able to fit in all that well, I suppose. Their Weavile, interesting look for them. Maybe just want another top tier in there, maybe a slightly different defensive profiling look overall. Kind of interesting. Wonder what that'll end up being. And finally, we were threatened by this quite a bit here. Michael's been using the Iron Valiant pretty darn well, especially with the Terra. But come on, it's Ogerpon Hearthflame. What do you expect?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. The attack raise on a Terra is certainly fantastic. Able to take use of that, and after they have picked it up, able to get a little more use of the Terra of Iron Valiant. May have been a matchup specific thing that they waited to make this trade, or want to feel out the team a little bit. But they had that chance. The deadline approached, and they decided that the +1 attack was too good to pass up, and they'll pass up on the additional versatility of the already versatile Iron Valiant, and just take the very predictable but good attack raise from their Ogerpon.
Ogerpon's so good. Shout out to the X+1 for the Terra rules on that. Okay, well, we don't have to talk about Week 7, do we? I guess so. So we start off with a quick game here, won by the Corviknight Clobbers, getting back on track over my Buffalo Bouffalant. Turn 1, Rotom swaps to Illumise's T-Wave, then Volt Switch just 2/3 to Salazzle out into Cinderace easy, but Salazzle with the Scarf though outspeeds Poisons with Sludge Bomb 2 before going down into Great Tusk. The itemless Acrobatics doing 77 to Tusk before going down to Rapid Spin, and Appleton revenging in exchange for its item. Out into Ogerpon, SD up on the switch. Rotom has a 3 and 8 chance to live, not going to get it. Down to Knockoff, out into Appleton who eats a knock and recovers up, but now he reveals the player off to Oko. Great set from the Ogerpon, who's still at full after 2 KOs. And of course, at +2, Latios in Ogerpon, Terras, and Ogerpon wins the speed tie to Oko. I cannot catch a break here. Bisharp comes in, gets a crit with Sucker. There's the break, I guess, but it doesn't matter too much. It just goes down into the hands with no HP investment, who lives a hit on 1 to get the KO, but at such low health, Discharge finishes off hands 3-0, the way of the Clobberers. Next up, Akron Agron still riding high off their win last week, grabbing another one against the Chicago Clods here. Volt Switch does too much to his Spother, so it's forced out by Scissor, but King Gambit doesn't mind. Sandy Shock's not taking Kowtow well, the follow-up sucker giving the Clods the lead. Scissor U-turn out of Clod into Pelipper, knockoff removing the Black Sledge, then Surf, yep, it's Water Absorb and a Toxic back onto Pelipper. Dreadnought and Gyarados in at even, and Stone Edge lands to grab the Oko into Scissor on Screamtail, Stealth Rock, and Chi-Yu, nope, that's a U-turn, Chi-Yu way too low, and Dreadnought's getting a KO. Clodsire sacked there, and then a Spother as well, the Turtle going crazy. Screamtail and Cragonal is the wall, and goodbye rocks thanks to Rapid Spin. Into Pelipper on King Gambit, the Fallen 3 Stone Edge KOing there, well played, but Sucker isn't enough to bring down Bundle, who lands the clutch Hydro Pump. Sub isn't working on Screamtail, so out of Scissor, who do KOs with Bullet Punch, and you know Chi-Yu got chunked hard by that earlier too. The Agrons walk with this. Next match, it's the Newport Noctowls getting right back on track, this against the Summit County Psyducks. Turn 1, Reggie Lecky forces out Roaring Moon and gets Phalanx in on Hisui and Gudra. A great double out into Chandelure after it catches the Wheezing switch in, and then another switch from the Psyducks into Roaring Moon doesn't pay off as Willow nails that. Donphan tanks the U-turn into Torkoal and sets up rocks, which are immediately removed by Rapid Spin. Anyways, next set of rock go up, though, on Wheezing. The double into Roaring Moon, catching Shandy, allowing an knockoff onto Donphan at least. But the Noctowls also double switch again after that, going Regieleki on the Wheezing. And where are the ground types? Volt switch KOs out into Phalanx on Moon, who U-turns to Volcarona, and there's the ground type as it quivers up. Fiery Dance does nothing to Salamence, though, who D-dances up too, and then again on Torkoal. Oh no, EQ KOs and Moxie Boost. It outspeeds Scovillain in the Sun and Proto Roaring Moon too. They're dropping like flies. Hooter down, Volcarona down, not even a pity flame body at the end. 6-0 thanks to Salamence. It is 6-0 weeks. The Boulders just won't go down quietly. Another win, this against the Cincinnati Incineroar. Turn 1, Mew stops spikes from Deoxys, then Iron Defense to tank knockoff. Psychic Noise into Tentacruel is nice, who does haze away the boost before going to the level 1 Pseudo Wudo. Psychic Noise is excellent. Stopping the healing as the Impostery lives on 1. Endeavor bringing Mew to 1 HP as well, okay? But a swap into Quackleval on the Sucker Punch. Bad news bears as Aqua Step gives him a KO and thus a D-Dance. Tentacruel doesn't live 1 either. 2 D-Dances. Triple Axle into Tropius hits once. Twice, actually that's all it needs. Another KO. Gouging Fire lives 1, but Dragonclaw not even doing half. Another Aqua Step, another KO. Darkrai down, and then Deoxys Defense lives a +5 Aqua Step, but isn't doing anything but knock off back. That's 6 KOs from the Dancing Ducks, saving Sasbo's season for now. Next up, Steve missed the memo, but only barely. It's a 5-0 over the Chillin' Chi-Yus as the Wobbuffets climb up to tie the Chi-Yus at 4-3. Turn 1, swap into Decidueye on Ceaseless Edge, taking equal damage thanks to Helmet. U-turn out of Gloking and its Future Sight into Landorus, Rotom, Heat Walls, except for Smackdown. EQ going into Breloom as Future Sight does over half. U-turn into Petron, good goggles, keep it awake. Hammerot answering Shadow Ball, but Decidueye, and again defogging on Rotom. T-Wave into Lando, very nice, and then into Iron Moth on Overheat. Another Overheat, this into Gloking, but Eject Pack triggers and gets him Chen Pao. Crunch will be getting a KO, and he sacks the Gloking. Goldango in, that's a Scarf. Trick goes into Iron Moth to give it an item. Steve learning from last week. U-turn out of Rotom and its Helmet. Landorus Smackdown does good damage and blocks Volt Switch, so another Smackdown does KO the Rotom. Samurott in, Decidueye in, Roost up on Goldango. Iron Moth into Tank, make it rain easily. Into Breloom, Morning Sun up. Back to Petron, good double into Hammerot, but Steve stays in on flip turn. Breloom just goes down to the Malignant Chain, but here's the problem. G-Knight is in. Chain doesn't poison. On the D-Dance up, EQ takes down Petron, not giving it a chance to breathe. Necrozma in next. D-Knight roosts up on a D-Dance. They both D-Dance again. Necrozma gets to do it twice, though, thanks to Mirror Herb. Terra Ghost to help against a possible E-Speed. Photon Geyser through Multiscale. It's an Oko. Huge. Shadow Claw KOs Goldango. Brick Break nabs Hammerot, and that's the Necrozma sweep I was expecting last week. Good stuff from the Wobbuffets. Next up, we're done going chalk. So here are the Kinglers. Michael and the Kanto Kinglers getting in the win column against Chad CL Steamrollers. Turn 1 Kilowattrel into Tinglu to tank Ursaluna's Ice Punch, and an immediate freeze, obviously, as Flame Orb goes off. Slowking tanks CC, but back into Tinglu, it's not tanking 2 Facades. Down it goes. Kyurem, Terra Ice, Freeze Dry into Corviknight, does 3/4, but Red Card forces in Slowking. Tailwind as it chillies into Kyurem. U-turn out into Hoopa, who barely tanks a Blizzard, with Tailwind up, out into Kilowattrel. Knockoff removes Scarf, so another outspeeds and KOs, and with Tailwind down, Kyurem can still get outsped. Goodbye Specs, down goes Hoopa. Finally, Ursaluna in on Rillaboom, and it U-turns out into Corviknight, who goes down to the Blood Moon. Rotom Wash in, Hydro Pump, 92%, it does KO. Kyurem back in for the Freeze Drive, but here's Iron Boulder. Quirk Drive, here we go. CC KO Cinchino. Slowking is full health. Sword Stance up. CC does almost half to Slowking, but Throat Chop finishes it off, and Kyurem is hopelessly outsped too. Boulder finally putting in the work as the Kinglers get a win. Next match, I haven't even asked Michael, but I'm giving him no choice. The Boopers and Burbs haven't featured before, but do you see the end screen of this match? Two great teams and coaches went head-to-head here. It's a shame only one could win in a contender for match of the season. Obviously, this came down to the wire, but how down to the wire are we talking? How much did those rolls at the end of the game matter? Michael of the Burbs will be breaking down his loss, but that's not an insult, so we go over an honorable match in which Fortress and Serena, among others, put in the finest of work. If you want to know how we got here, check out the match of the week on this very channel in the near future. Next match, one more upset, one more 6-0. We warned you the Close Combat Club is here to take some names. A 6-0 over the otherwise rolling Terrifier Heatwave. Meowstick gets up a Reflect before being taunted by Lando into an Eye Leap on rocks to also get up rocks. Clefable Wish on Iron Treads, who removes rocks and sets Grassy Train by bumping into Arbalova. Back to Annihilate. Bulk Up looks nice. Strength Sap not the play, that's an attack boost, but Rage Fist does nothing. Encore, I see, good play. Now you can stay in, or you can go to Belly Bolt, get crit, and get O-Code. Back to Arbalova. Giga Drain, not doing much. Not doing much either, and the Encore is ended. Drain Punch KOs, and Annihilate is back up to full. Clefable trying to stall out Rage Fist after 3 wishes and protects Annihilate. Swaps into Treads on the Calm Mind, of course. Nice timing, but still, Rapid Spin for the speed boost, and Ironhead just KOs Clef. Intimidate in from Lando means Ice Banner does not KO, but Earth Power doesn't either. Another spinner tanked by Weavile, even if it doesn't outspeed, it tanks an Ironhead. Flinch, Weavile goes down, that's fine. Lando with another Intimidate should help the final Mon as it goes down. Ironhead, nasty plot. Oh, Deoxys going for it. Ironhead, flinch, Ironhead, flinch. The most clutch Iron Treads this side of the Mississippi. Could have gotten out of control with the +2 Deoxys, but the club looks poised for a late push. And with the Calgary Corviknights getting the forfeit dub over the Mighty Mill Tanks, who appeared to be done for the season here, that's what happened in Week 7. So, yes, there was quite a bit more that happened this week, but the power rankings still looking relatively the same. Still have the Boopers, Noctows, Corviknights, Heatwave up top there. Corviknight Clobbers, of course, with their win over my Bouffalant, do take over the 5 spot over top of me. Close Combat Club making their appearance on the list here at 7, and Steve still hanging in there at number 8. I guess the conversation should be, Steve, the Boopers still at the top there. What an awesome match that was, for sure. But it was a close one, and they kind of look a little bit vulnerable, but we still have them ahead of the Noctows, who I think you and I can agree is looking probably the best right now. But, boy, if the Boopers don't just keep pulling out wins, we have to give them credit for that.
Yeah, they certainly do. They've had the one loss, just like every other team. And, a lot of their losses early on were or a lot of their wins early on we were discounting just because of how close they were and, how long can they keep it up. And, we're 7 weeks through the season now, and they've kept it up. They have a easy remaining match. They're looking in a fantastic position. And, while perhaps we might put a little more stock in the Noctowls due to the historic strength of the team, I still think there is definitely an argument and certainly enough to keep them at that number 1 spot.
And, of course, don't forget the regular season monster that are the Calgary Corviknights. They're still competing for yet another number 1 seed, which is kind of insane. Heatwave and Clobbers, kind of fitting that these two are the teams that are here at 5-2, still rolling along pretty well here. Clobbers, of course, with a real nice big win here, and the Heatwave, whoo boy, just not their week, I suppose, but they also may still be looking to get used to their team and trying to fill out a couple of uses there for their new Mons. Still sitting ahead of the Clobbers now is, yes, Clobbers finally got the big win we've been waiting for, but how big was it? I'm not too sure, but both of them have defeated my Bouffalant and sit ahead of me as a result.
Yeah, that's where we have them. They're both also 5-win teams now, which guarantee a spot for the playoffs. So that is certainly something to note as well. The Heatwave staying on top of the Clobbers really comes down to just, the historic precedence here. The Clobbers have been, similar to how we were discounting the Chill and Chi-Yus earlier because they were focused all through Dragonite. The Clobber success really has been going through the Ogre Pond, and if you're not ready for it or it gets some lucky breaks against you, it really does seem to carry their team far. But if that is answered, will the Clobbers and the rest of the team be able to put it together? We'll have to find out in the playoffs.
I suppose so, but it's worked so far. And speaking of playoffs, we have quite a few teams here that still are just kind of clinging on, honestly. Bouffalant Club and Wobbuffets are all at 4-3. We'll get to the playoff picture in just a little bit. But Bouffalant have, of course, the win over the Boopers, which looks pretty nice. Close Combat Club just got their win there against the Heatwave. Boy, these two have had absolutely brutal schedules, and actually the only other one with a above average difficulty schedule on here would be your Wobbuffets as well. So yes, some 4-3 teams, but they've waded through some pretty tough waters. If these 3 teams can make it to the playoffs, they all seem quite battle tested and ready to go.
Yeah, we had previously mentioned it with the club how their schedule had been tough, facing the 1, 2, and 3 Boopers, Knockouts, and Calgary, and they finally faced another one of these top teams in the Heat Wave, and defeated them enough to really shake it out and separate the top three from four on, and get themselves into that conversation as well. So a very big win for them there. Of course, Buffalo with the win over the Boopers you mentioned, very much a crowning achievement, but they also have losses to some of those teams that are missing the list, the Birds especially. So there's a little bit of a shakeup there. The eighth, myself coming here, the Wobbuffets at 8. Really, there's a couple teams we could consider here, but the Wobbuffets seem to have the toughest schedule, especially against these teams facing teams like the Noctowls and Buffalo and the Clobberers. However, those are all losses. In terms of teams who have missed it, there are a couple who have wins over these teams. And myself and the Wobbuffets do not. But overall, in terms of strength of schedule and how things are looking, we felt the Wobbuffets are right now the number 8 team.
And with all of this talk about standings, we will get to that in just a moment. But because it is the second to last week here, we only have 1 week left to go. We do want to kind of pair that up with what we see moving forward. So we're actually going to skip ahead just a moment here and take a look at the MVP race as it's developing right now. There's a little more separation actually here too. Number 11 has 9 KOs, and number 12 has 8 KOs, and everything after that is 7 and below. But definitely a little bit of a shakeup here. A couple of interesting, familiar names around here. The Ogre Pond Wellspring up with the Dragonite tied for first now. Both of them 17 and 4. Enamorous Incarnate just 1 KO behind. You saw it standing there at the very end last time. But Steve, I think it's number 4 that you'd like to take a look at, yeah?
Yeah, as we were reviewing this, the mod I'm certainly most surprised by is the Iron Treads. I have not used Iron Treads myself, and I certainly view it, it's like Great Tusk, but it's the more support-oriented version. You're definitely bringing it more for the spin and not for the raw power it brings and the KOs it picks up. But the club have been able to, in these past couple of weeks especially, really utilize the Iron Treads quite well, and it is showing here. With the 13 KOs, 3 deaths, it is performing fantastically for them. Has made it up to this number 4 spot, which the 1, 2, and 3 have kind of separated themselves. There's the gap we can see to the 4, but they're the top of the rest, and really worth highlighting there.
And of course, you have mentioned to me before how funny it is to see Gouging Fire still here. 12 KOs. Those happened a few weeks ago now, and only happened in 2 weeks. Yeah, 6060 for Gouging Fire, and that is all so far. But they're still hanging in there at 5. Also of note, the Noctowls have the number 8 Regieleki, but also the 11 and 12. So a lot of mods putting in a ton of work there for the Noctowls. Okay, enough stalling. Let's talk about the standings. And yeah, we have quite a bit to go through here, actually. First, congrats to the Corviknight Clobberers for being the next team to clinch a playoff spot there with 5 wins. Obviously, that's going to be enough, but is 4 going to be enough? We're not quite so sure now. So a few things to talk about here. Of course, we still have our 3, 6, and 1 teams, the 2, 5, and 2s, and currently 5 teams at 4 and 3 that would all at this exact moment be in the playoffs race, but we'll talk a little bit more about the playoff race in just a moment here. Anything else that catches your eye on this standings list before we move on to talk about the playoff picture at large?
Yeah, it's the only thing really you can see here is differential. Noticing the Noctowls at 6 and 1, being 6 differential ahead of Calgary and Boopers, who are both very close at 15 and 16. You can really see kind of the excellence we were mentioning in their play there, whereas some of these other teams have had a lot more closer wins. And then additionally, some of the 4 and 3 teams creeping ahead of the 5 and 2 teams in terms of differential, especially, shouting out my Wobbuffets with the 4th highest differential right now, plus 13. As long as I can pick up that win in week 8, that should be a pretty good way, because I'm playing the Heat Wave, to make it up into the top 4 or 5 spot overall. So some things to watch out there with the differential moving forward.
But Steve, with such a high differential, surely you're locked to make playoffs. But we have something to talk about here. We've kind of hinted at it for quite a bit here. With all these teams in the mix, is 4 and 4 good enough to make playoffs? And we can finally tell you whether or not that's true after next week. We still have quite a bit more work to do here as we look at the final teams remaining in playoff contention that have not yet clinched here. And yes, you are seeing that correctly. That is 9 teams still that could potentially make it into the final 3 spots or more. We can kind of wrap this up with a couple general statements here, Steve. Tell us what it would take to make the playoffs this season, especially for what these 4 and 3 teams are doing.
Yeah, so the key to the playoffs is the 4 and 3 teams, as that's where the number 8 currently sits. For the 4 and 3 teams, if they win, they are guaranteed in. Notably, none of these teams also play each other when we get to the schedule in a moment. So all of these 5 teams playing different teams, any of them wins, they get to 5 wins, they're guaranteed in. However, if at least 3 of them, so a majority of them lose, that would mean the 8th place team is going to be 4-4, meaning all of these teams, since they all have 4 wins at least, will get in, and it opens the door for additional teams. So whichever the majority of these 5 teams, the Wobbuffets, Close Combat Club, Bouffalant, Agrons, and Chiyus, whatever the majority of them do, that'll dictate how it goes for everyone. Looking at the other teams, the 3 and 4 teams, they all have a chance to get in if they win, and if a majority of the 4 and 3 teams lose. This is a little easier for some of the teams. The Boulders and Burbs are playing some of the 4 and 3 teams, so for them to win necessitates that one of the 4 and 3 teams lose, making it more likely. Meanwhile, the Incineroar and Psyducks are playing different teams, not at that 4 and 3 record, so it's a little less likely that they make it, as they need more help than just their direct win.
And that will directly lead us into the schedule. Yes, we could potentially leave it here and look at this a little bit more, but these are 9 teams. That is half the league that has a playoff spot riding on this final match. And to really get a grasp of what's going on, we get to look at 7 of the 9 matches, which is kind of insane. I told Steve this beforehand. Instead of looking at notable matches, obviously all 7 of those have some kind of implication for playoff structure here, so we're actually instead going to do a little bit of fun exercise here and do a bit of a pick'em. So without going too much in depth as to the individual teams and matchups, kind of going off of feel, vibes, and how the teams have been performing recently, we're going to take a look and see what we think the final outcome of some of these games will be. So we get to start off at the top, Buffalo Bouffalant, Calgary Corviknight. This is a pretty tough one for my Bouffalant, rounding out what is a brutal schedule, only rivaled by the Close Combat Club schedule. Steve, my last matchup against Calgary did not go particularly well in a previous season either. Maybe my worst loss in the last several seasons, which is pretty tough. Do you think I can pull this one out?
Between the 2 teams right now, I would certainly give the favor a little bit to the Bouffalant, actually. The historical strength there. I know there are some difficulties, and Calgary, has been doing quite well. They haven't lost since week 1, on quite a hot streak. The one item that is, in my mind, tipping the scale a little bit towards the Bouffalant, give them that 51-52% for me to pick them, is the fact that Calgary has not yet brought Dedenne. So Dedenne is a guarantee bring for this week. While Dedenne is a real mon and, can do some things, it's going to be more of a 6 versus 5.5, which in my mind is enough to tip the scales to the Bouffalant's favor for my pick.
Shout out to Dedenne for sure. Man, we mentioned this is a tough one. Cincinnati and Incineroar do not have to directly beat a 4 and 3 team. They would have to directly beat the 6 and 1 Newport Noctowls in order to have a shot in there. Surprisingly enough, looking at their historical record, I believe the Incineroar are actually one of the teams that has a couple of wins against the Noctowls. Can they do it again here and make some magic happen in the final week?
I do believe you're accurate, though. In terms of the Noctowls' worst matchups, I think the Incineroar is one of them. I just based on how both their seasons are going, the Noctowls on the up and up. They had that one weird loss to the Agrons, but the Incineroar, ever since getting that double curse, have been on a downward trajectory. I certainly would favor the Noctowls, but I'm curious if Matt and the Incineroar are going to plead to their friend that this is for their chance at playoffs, and maybe try and weasel in a little bit of a lesser performance from the Noctowls to take the win.
We've seen some crazier things happen whenever 2 people play at the same house, maybe working through other people. It's very funny to watch. Wobbuffets and Heatwave. Steve, yes, the Heatwave are 5 and 2, and yes, you're playing for your playoff life, so there could be a lot on the line here. I do wonder, though, Heatwave did not look all that great in the last matchup. They may have been solved here. There are quite a few things it looks like to exploit in the lineup, but they've played quite well. Do you have enough juice to make it?
Oh, I sure hope I do. As of recording this, match prep last night went as I fell asleep for an hour, so I don't know if that's a good or bad sign. But, in terms of who I'm going to pick here,
Excellent.
I have a reasonable chance, but we will certainly see what comes of it.
Excellent. Great to hear that. Next up, it's going to be a couple of those teams that you alluded to that play each other from that previous list. Akron Agrons 4 and 3, Route 1 Burbs 3 and 4 need to directly beat a 4 and 3 team in order to have that shot. Agrons, boy, what a roller coaster season they have had. Absolutely crazy to go over. And these 2 teams, man, I'm not sure. What are you looking at here?
Some notable things. It's funny looking back at we really emphasize the Agrons as the special team that traded for some physical pieces, mainly because I had noticed it when I had played them. But the Burbs keep mentioning that they really had the same issue that they fixed with their trades as well. And looking at their team, yeah, their big attackers were all special before. Picking up the Ogre Pond certainly has helped that. So two teams that overdrafted on the special side, made some trades, are now a little more balanced. This one is a tough one. Of note, the Agrons do need to bring Haunter this week, which in theory gives a little bit of an edge to the Burbs. The Burbs do have some unused mons, but there's also some additional details that I'm not going to get into here, so they're not required to come to this match. So based on required low tier mons to come, I might give a slight edge to the Burbs. However, we'll see if the rain can dampen Ogre Pond, and if the rain is enough, that I'll pick the Agrons. I'll take the Agrons here.
Yeah, it may have been interesting to see Raging Bolt try and go crazy in the rain, but instead, as you mentioned, the Ogre Pond, that's a little bit tough. Wonder how the Burbs are overcoming that. They are definitely well aware of some of the tricks that can happen with weather against them with the Agrons. Shout out to that Vaporeon Weather Ball. Next up, Summit County Psyducks. Unlike the Incineroar, yes, they have to play somebody outside of the 4 and 3, 3 and 4s, but it is the lowly Steamrollers who just dropped a match to the Kanto Kinglers, but did make a couple of transactions. Do you think they have a shot to upset the Psyducks? Or are they going to waltz their way and sneak barely potentially into another playoff spot?
I think the Steamrollers do have a chance to win this. I know their earlier win this season came against the Incineroar because the Incineroar were not really adequately prepared for the matchup. They thought the Steamrollers had checked out. And, after the Steamrollers lose to the Kinglers, are the Psyducks going to approach this with such a lackadaisical attitude as well? Or, because it's their playoff life on the line, are they going to put forth their best effort? If the Psyducks are trying here and, not taking this as, supposed to be a free match, I will pick the Psyducks to take it.
Yeah, I think they have come through in the clutch before in a similar situation just a few seasons ago. Of course, I think it was season 12, starting off very hot, almost blowing their playoff chances, then clutching it out in the final week. Wonder if they can do it again here. Close Combat Club. Again, their schedule just does not get any easier in how they get the Corviknight Clobberers up next. But they have been looking pretty darn good without being able to speak with them nearly as much as I have been able to in seasons past. It sure looks like they've come around onto what their team is supposed to do. I wonder if they're relying too much on that Iron Treads, though. Is that going to be enough to break through the Clobberers?
Yeah, that is a big question. The other big question is, what is Torracat and Skuntank doing this match? With those two mons and, the strength of the Clobberers, especially the favorable tight matchup of the Wellspring into the Iron Treads that they've really been relying on, I'm going to give a edge to the Clobberers here. I think the required mons the club needs to bring this week will be a little bit of a damper on their attitude. But overall, I do think, the Clobberers make it, and I hope the club is still able to make it to the playoffs.
And one other team that definitely would love that help from the Clobberers and also be able to help themselves if they can beat the Chi-Yus would be the Boulder Boulders, who suddenly find themselves a little bit hot, winning 2 of their last 3 in the other one, 2 myself, of course, which is pretty fun. Boulders, Chi-Yus, seem to be trending in opposite directions. Can the Boulders take advantage of what the Chi-Yus have been packing?
Looking at this match, there again, some required mons. The Chi-Yus were a little bit unaware of the bench warming clause until specifically reminded about it. So they need to bring Dragonair and Gloom this week. Although the Boulders also need to bring Quillfish Hisui. Both teams having mons they need to bring. However, I think that the mons on the Chi-Yu side, the 2-0 pointers, really not going to help a ton. Well, the Quillfish certainly has a spot. Intimidate is going to be useful against Dragonite at the very least. The Boulders also can certainly find ways to prepare well for the Chi-Yu's Dragonite. Based on the over-reliance, I think I'm going to give this one to the Boulders.
If all those things happen, oh boy, we are in for an absolute mess. One last reminder that it's whoever has the same record as the 8th team will also get in. So if that 8th place team is 5 and 3, it would be only 5 and 3 and above that makes it. But if the 8 team is 4 and 4, then all the 4 and 4s get to make it. And boy, do we have a lot of possible opportunities for a bunch of teams to get in and have a giant play-in round as well, which could be an absolute blast. Or maybe you're a team that's done well all season and you're going to be stuck in a play-in match against a team that is hot, and that could be tough too. That's almost going to wrap things up for us, but we do have to address the curse wheel here one more time. Yes, it doubled up on the Chi-Yus, and ooh boy, they have come tumbling down just a little bit. Steve, what did you do to them?
Just planned well, and hopefully, I don't know. Yeah, hopefully the same happens this week with the Boulders. Certainly, Boulders win is more reassurance for myself. So, hoping the Curse Wheel continues to have this very strong effect with the double hit, but we'll see.
We'll see. Indeed, as both of us are still on here, there are a lot of teams that this could potentially impact and influence. And unfortunately for you, Steve, that is going to come up onto number 8. That is not good news for the Wobbuffets.
Well, that sucks. I guess I can stop prepping.
I guess that also means that we're not rigging it unless I am rigging it behind the scenes and just want to get in over Steve. But we can't do that. We do have to meet in the finals once again, third time in a row. So I wouldn't do that to my buddy Steve. That's going to wrap it up for us for Week 7 recap and power rankings. Oh boy, you're going to need to join us again next week. Probably a little bit delayed. Steve and I both out of town. We'll figure out how to get the Week 8 recap and power rankings out to you as we head into the playoffs because we have so much still left to decide with 1 week left. You're going to need to come back next time. Don't forget to check out the match of the week 2. We'll see you then.